Hey, 6th grade, Mr. Herzberg here. It is Friday, April 23rd, 2020. We made it to Friday, good job. Which means we're going to be doing Tom Sawyer today, Chapter 10. We're going to be going over the Chapter 9 Tom Sawyer questions from Wednesday night. And we're going to be going over today's journal. So you won't get another video from me until Monday, April 27th. So I hope you guys have a good weekend. If you don't check in with me at today's Google Meet, I'll see you next time. So let's get started. Today's journal, you're going to be reading about what happened to Amelia Earhart, the famous pilot who was lost. We've got 2 paragraphs about her to read, and your job will be to tell me what you think the central idea of that piece is. Remember, the central idea is, what was the author's purpose in writing this piece? Was it to persuade, to inform, or entertain? And if you pick one of those 3, give a little more detail as to why you picked it, okay? So your 3 questions for today that go with that are, what is the central idea of this article? What evidence is presented to support the central idea? And what evidence is presented to support the, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Nikumaru theory. I probably slaughtered the way that's pronounced, but answer those 3 questions. Remember, give good text evidence, and you should be okay. Let me know if you have any questions, and let's take a look at this homework questions from the other night. Tom Sawyer, Chapter 9. What did Tom want to stay awake? Why did he want to stay awake when he went to bed? He was waiting on Huck. Remember, he and Huck made an agreement the day before when they were playing Robin Hood that Huck would come by in the middle of the night and he would meow like a cat, and Tom would sneak out and they'd go hang out at the cemetery looking for ghosts. What were the 3 men doing in the cemetery? We have 3 men. We have Muff Potter, we have Doc Robinson, and Injun Joe, and they are grave robbing. Remember, we talked about this. The Doc needs to experiment on bodies to learn the human anatomy and medicine. So back then they didn't believe in that. So he was getting bodies, and he needed 2 guys to help him do some of the manual labor. Why did the 3 men end up fighting? Injun Joe says that Doc Robinson threw him in jail a couple of years back for begging for money or panhandling when he knocked on the Doc's door asking for money for a meal, and the Doc called the cops. How did Injun Joe make Potter think he'd killed Doc Robinson? Well, Injun Joe saw Doc Robinson and Muff Potter kind of get into it, and the Doc hit Muff in the head with a board. Muff got knocked out. So while he was on the ground, Muff Potter kind of took the blame, essentially, because he was passed out and he didn't realize that Injun Joe was the one that killed the Doc, and so he thought he had been drinking a little bit that night. So the Doc said, or Injun Joe said, you were drunk. That's why you did this. Okay. And next up, what 5 instances of superstition are there in this chapter? So a bunch of superstitions. The first one is they believe that there's ghosts out at the cemetery. They believe that these ghosts are there because one of them, Haas Williams, and he's there because he died in a way that wasn't nice. The meowing, dead cats, and all sorts of other things the kids all have. Specifically when it comes to cemeteries, they have all kinds of superstitions. What is the source of melancholy caterwauling which awakens Tom? And it's Huck at the window meowing. He goes meow whenever he wants Tom to come out. So funny enough, one of the neighbors thinks it's an actual stray cat out there meowing in the middle of the night, and they throw a shoe and they hit Huck. What is the atmosphere as Tom and Huck venture to the graveyard? Definitely the mood is somber, scary, gloomy, lonely, and spooky. Why are Tom and Huck not seen? They're actually hiding behind a tree and one of the gravestones. Who does Tom and Huck expect to arrive, and who shows up? They think it's a ghost, but it's actually Injun Joe Muff Potter and the Doc. Why does Tom and Huck, why are they upset at the arrival? Because they were kind of hoping it would be a ghost. Who appears to be the leader of the unexpected trio? The Doc. Who ends up with the upper hand? Injun Joe. Why is, or how does Muff Potter's greed lead to his being framed for the Doc's murder? He's always drinking. He's greedy about drinking. He never stops drinking, and it's never enough for him. So he kind of just keeps on drinking no matter what. Let's see here. Explain how Muff Potter's greed, we did that one. What grudge does Injun Joe hold against the Doc? He holds a grudge for, again, he says that he locks up, he had Injun Joe locked up for begging for money. What lie does Joe tell in this chapter? He tells Muff that he actually murdered the Doc, when in actuality it wasn't. It was not Muff Potter, it was Injun Joe. And I asked you to make a little compare-contrast chart comparing and contrasting Doc and Muff. Muff is very innocent, sort of a innocent individual, where Injun Joe is very manipulative. Okay. All right. Let's do some reading. And it seems my cat Pipin here has joined us. That's okay. Chapter 10. Here we go. This chapter is called A Solemn Oath, Terror Brings Repentance and Mental Punishment. The two boys flew on and on towards the village, speechless with horror. They glanced back and over their shoulders from time to time, apprehensively, as if they had feared they might be followed. Every stump that they stared up in the path seemed to be might be a man or an enemy, and that lay the village. The barking that aroused the watchdogs seemed to give wings to their feet. "If we could only get to the old tannery before we break down," whispered Tom, in short catches between breaths. "I can't stand it much longer, Huck." Huckleberry's hard pantings were his only reply, and the boys fixed their eyes on the goal of their hopes and bent their work to win it. They ganged steadily on, and at last, breast to breast, they burst through the open door and fell grateful and exhausted in the sheltering shadows beyond. By and by, their pulses slowed down, and Tom whispered, "Huck, what do you think will come of all this?" "I don't know if Doc Robinson dies. I guess a hanging will come of it." "Do you, though?" "Well, I know it, Tom." Tom thought for a while, and then he said, Who will tell? We?" Tom thought and then said, "What are you talking about? Suppose something happened and Injun Joe didn't hang. Why, he'd kill us sometime or other, just as dead sure as we're laying here." "That's just what I was thinking to myself too, Huck," said Tom. "If anybody tells, let Muff Potter do it, if he's fool enough. He's generally drunk enough." Tom said nothing and went on thinking. Presently he whispered, "Huck, Muff Potter don't know it. How can he tell?" "What's the reason he don't know it?" said Huck. "Because he just got that whack with Injun Joe on the head. You reckon he'd see anything? You reckon he knowed anything?" "By hokey, that's right, Tom. And besides, looky here, maybe that whack did some good for him." "I ain't likely, Tom. He was all liquored up. I could see that. Besides, he always has. Well, when Pap's full of the liquor, you could take and belt him over the head with a church, and it wouldn't faze him. He says his own self. So it's the same with Muff Potter, of course. But if a man was dead sober, I reckon maybe that whack might fetch him. I don't know." Another reflective silence. Tom said, "Huck, are you sure you can keep mum about this?" "Tom, we gotta keep mum. You know that. Injun Joe is a devil, and he wouldn't make any more of drowning us than a couple of cats if we was to squeak about this, and they didn't hang him. Now looky here, Tom. Lest we take a swear to one another, that's what we gotta do here. We're gonna have to swear to one another to keep mum." "All right, I'm agreed. It's the best thing," said Tom. "You want to hold hands and swear we won't ever tell, or what?" "No, that ain't gonna do. Not for this, at least. That's good enough for little rubbish common things. Specifically with gals, because, well, they go back on their words anyway and go blabbing off in a huff. No, but There's other be right in a big old battle like this. We gotta get blood. Tom's whole being applauded this idea. It was deep and dark and awful. The hour, the circumstances, the surroundings were in keeping with it. He picked up a clean pine single that day in the moonlight, took a little fragment of red keel out of his pocket, got the moon to his work, and painfully scrawled these lines, emphasizing each downstroke by clamping his tongue between his teeth and letting the pressure up on the upstrokes. And here's what it says. Huck and Tom Sawyer swears they will keep mum about this, and they wish they may drop down dead in their tracks if they ever tell about this and rot. Huck was filled with admiration of Tom's facility in writing and sublimity of his language. He took a pin from his lapel and was going to prick his flesh, but then Tom said, "Hold on, Huck, don't do that just yet. A pin's brass. It might have verdigris on it." What's verdigris?" said Huck. "It's poison. That's what it is. You just swallow a little ounce of it and you'll see." So Tom unwound the thread of his needle, and each boy pricked the ball of his finger and squeezed out a drop of blood. In time, after many squeezes, Tom managed to sign his initials using the ball of his little finger of the pen. Then he showed it to Huck, and they made an H and an F, and the oath was all complete. They buried the shingle close to the wall with some dismal ceremonies and incantations, and the fetters that bound their tongues were considered to be locked and the key thrown away. A figure crept stealthily through a break in the other end of the ruined building, but they didn't notice it. "Tom," whispered Huck, "does this keep us forever telling? For always and forever?" "Yes, it does. It don't make any difference what happens. We gotta keep mum. We drop down dead. Don't you know that?" "I reckon I do, though." So they continued to whisper for some time, and presently a dog set up a long, luxurious howl just outside within 10 feet of them. The boys then clasped each other suddenly in an agony of complete fright. "Whew. Which of us does he mean?" gasped Huck. "I don't know. Peep through the crack, quick." "No, you, Tom." "I can't do it, Huck." "Please, Tom. There it is again, that howling." "Oh, Lordy, I'm thankful," whispered Tom. "I know his voice. That's old Bull Harbison." "Oh, that's good. I tell you what, Tom, I was most scared to death. I'd have bet anything it was a stray." The dog howled again. The boys' hearts sank once more. "Oh my, they ain't Bull Harbison," whispered Huck. "Do, Tom." Tom, quaking with fear, yielded and put his eye to the crack, whispered, it was hardly audible, and said, "Oh, Huck, it's a stray dog." "Quick, Tom, quick. Who does he mean?" "Huck, he must mean us both." "We were right together." "Oh, Tom, I reckon we're goners now. I reckon there ain't no mistake about it. I'll go too. I've been so wicked." "I'll fetch it. This comes of playing hooky and doing everything a feller's not supposed to be doing. I might be good, like Sid, if I tried, but no, it wouldn't work. But if I ever get off this time, I'll lay just waller and I'll go to all the Sunday schools." Tom began to shuffle a little. "Bad." And Huckleberry began to snuffle too. "Confound it, Tom Sawyer, just old pie alongside of what I am. Lordy, I wished I only had half of your chance." Tom choked off and whispered, "Look, Hucky, he's got his back to us." Huck looked with his joy in his heart. "Oh, by jingoes. Was it to us when he was howling?" "Yeah, he did. But I like a fool never thought. Well, this is great, you know. Now, who could he mean?" The howling stopped. Tom picked up his ears. "Shh, what's that?" he whispered. "Sounds like hogs grunting. No, it's somebody snoring, Tom." "That's it. Whereabouts is it coming from, Huck?" "I believe it's down there yonder." Sounds so anyway. You know, Pap used to sleep there sometimes, along with the hogs, but, Law bless you, he lifts things up when he snores. Besides, I reckon he ain't ever coming back to this town anymore." The spirit of adventure rose and once more in the boys. "Hucky, do you mind if I lead?" "I don't like too much, Tom. Supposing it's Injun Joe." Tom quailed. But presently the temptation rose up strong again, and the boys agreed to try, with the understanding that they would take their heels, and the snoring stopped. So they went tiptoeing stealthily down, the one behind the other, and when they got within 5 steps of the snorer, Tom stepped on his stick, and it broke with a sharp snap. The man moaned, writhed a little in his face, and came into the moonlight. It was Muff Potter. The boys' hearts stood still, and their hopes too, when the man moved, but their fears passed away now. They tiptoed out through the broken, weather-beaten house and stopped a little distance to exchange a parting word. That long, luxurious howl rose on the night air. They turned and saw the stray dog standing within a few feet of where Potter was lying, and facing Potter, with his nose pointing towards the heavens. "Oh, Jiminy, it's him!" exclaimed both boys in a breath. "Say, Tom, they say a stray dog came howling in Johnny Miller's house one time, about midnight, as much as 2 weeks ago, and a whippoorwill came in and lit on the banisters and snug, and the very same evening, and there ain't nobody dead that house yet." "Well, I know that, and suppose there ain't. Didn't Gracie Miller fall in the kitchen in fire and burn herself terribly the very next Saturday, though?" "Yeah, but she ain't dead, though, and once more she's getting better." "All right, well, let's wait and see. She's a goner, just as dead as Muff Potter's a goner. That's what the Negroes say, and they are all about these kinds of things, Huck." Then they separated cognating. When Tom crept in at his bedroom window that night, he was almost spent. He undressed with exclusive caution, fell asleep congratulating himself that nobody knew of his escapades that night. He was not aware the gently snoring Sid was awake, and he had been so for about an hour. When Tom woke, Sid was dressed and gone. There was a late look in the light, a late sense in the atmosphere. He was startled. Why hadn't he been called for breakfast, persecuted till he was up as usual? The thought filled him with bodings. Within 5 minutes he was dressed and downstairs, feeling sore and drowsy. The family still at the table, but they finished breakfast. There was no voice of rebuke, but they were averting their eyes. There was a silence and an air of solemnity that struck chill to the culprit's heart. He sat down and tried to seem happy, but it was uphill work. It roused him to even give a smile, and he lapsed into silence and let his heart sink down into the depths. After breakfast, Aunt Polly took him aside, and Tom almost brightened in the hope that he was going to get flogged or yelled at, but not this time. His aunt wept over him and asked him how he could go and break her old heart, and finally told him to go on and ruin himself and bring her gray hairs with sorrow and the grave, for it was no use for her to try with him anymore. This was way worse than 1,000 whippings, and Tom's heart was sorer now that his body. He cried, he pleaded for forgiveness, promised to reform over and over again, and then received his dismal feeling that he had won but an imperfect forgiveness and established but a futile confidence. He left the presence too miserable to even feel revengeful towards Sid, and so the latter's prompt retreat through the back gate was unnecessary. He moped to school gloomy and sad, and took his flogging along with Joe Harper for playing hooky the day before. With the air of one whose heart was busy with heavier woes and who wholly dead to trifles, and then he betook himself to his seat in class, rested his elbows on his desk, and his jaws on his hands, and stared at the wall with a stony face of suffering that reached the limit that no further can go. His elbow was pressing against some hard substance, and after a long time he slowly was pressing against some hard thing, and changed his position, and took this object with a sigh. It was paper. He unrolled it. A long, lingering, colossal sigh followed, and his heart broke. It was his brass Andurian doorknob given to Becky Thatcher. The final feather broke on the camel's back. All right, we're going to stop there. This guilt that Tom and Huck are feeling because of seeing the Doc's murder is going to rear its head constantly. These superstitions these boys have are just all over the place. I mean, there's a superstition for everything. A stray dog howling facing you means one thing. If the dog's not facing you when it's howling, it means something other. If it's not a stray, it's not bad. All these bad lucks and superstition and belief these boys have just goes to show you how times have changed and how uneducated they are and how much they are children indeed. So they feel bad for Muff, but they've both taken a blood oath, meaning they've actually drawn blood and signed on a piece of wood they carved saying they keep mum, which basically means they aren't going to rat anyone out. They aren't going to rat out, more specifically, Injun Joe. They're deathly scared that he'd kill him. So make sure you do your homework. If you didn't understand something or something just didn't make any sense, let me know. But this is kind of the this incident at the graveyard is kind of going up on the roller coaster of literature. We're kind of rising action here to the climax, which is the driving sort of motivation here, the protagonist being Injun Joe in this murder. I'll see you guys. Have a good weekend. If you need help tomorrow, I'll be at the Google Meet from 1 to 1:30. Have a good day.